Hi everyone, it's Mariana with Three Peaks Classroom. Thanks for joining me in this second part of a video series that I'm doing about diverse library. In my first video, I actually talked about my diverse range of books, or my lack thereof, I should say. Clearly you can see I'm missing some books representing some certain cultures. So in this video, I actually want to go through some of those diverse books that I've purchased, some new ones. I'm going to go through them, and we're going to unbox a couple of books that I've purchased for my classroom, and we're going to open them up together. So really quickly, I just want to go through some of the titles that I've purchased, and I'm going to add them to the correct pile to see if it ups my cultural diversity game. So the first book that I have is called Racism and Intolerance. And basically this book teaches students what racism and intolerance means. And the pictures that they use in this book are quite profound. So I'm excited to include this book in my resources. Now this book is going to go under my diversity pile. So it doesn't fall under a specific category or a specific culture. It talks about all types of cultures and races. So this is going to go in my books about diversity pile. The next book I have is called Seven Sacred Teachings, and it's the author is David Bouchard, who's a very famous Canadian author, and Dr. Joseph Martin. But this book is really special because it has an English and Ojibwe version. So there's both included in here. Okay, and basically this book talks about the different teachings of First Nation, Métis, Inuit cultures. And so, for example, humility is the first one, and it just talks about that teaching. And so there's an English version, and then there's the Ojibwe version on the side, which I think is going to be really interesting for my students to look at. So this definitely goes under my First Nation, Métis, Inuit pile. So that feels really good to be adding a book to that pile. The next book that I have is called The Honor Drum. And this is a book that is designed to start discussions about First Nation, Métis, Inuit teachings. And so, for example, it says, look to the people of age and of youth with a history of wisdom, of honor, and truth. And so it talks about how Indigenous people have been in North America since the beginning of people. And so there are discussion questions here that I can use to guide my discussions with my students. So The Honor Drum is also a First Nation Métis Inuit book. That goes on that pile. Next book I have is called The Hoop Dancer's Teachings, and this is written by Teddy Anderson. And I really like this book because it has simple language for my students to read and enjoy. So it says, you see the medicine wheel is made of 4 colors and each section is equal to all of the others. So it really explains some of the First Nation Métis Inuit teachings. So, The Hoop Dancer's Teachings. That feels really good. Next book I have is called The Grandmother's Dreamcatcher. And the author is Becky Ray McCain. And this story is about this little girl who has to stay with her grandmother for a week. So she has to leave her parents for a week. They have to go into town to do something. And she ends up having a really bad night's sleep. And the grandmother has a secret for her, and that is to create a dream catcher. And after they create the dream catcher together, the little girl ends up having really good sleeps. And what I really like about this book is at the very end of the story, it actually teaches you, or teaches the students, how to create your own dream catcher. Next book that I have is Phyllis's Orange Shirt, and this is a book with simple language honoring Orange Shirt Day. And for those of you who are watching that don't know what Orange Shirt Day is about, Orange Shirt Day is the story about a little girl who was forced to go to a residential school, and I believe her grandmother purchased a brand new orange shirt for her to wear, but as soon as she got to the residential school, she was forced to take it off and put on a uniform. And this story just basically talks about and educates children about the hardships that happened at residential schools, and that negative history that we have with residential schools. Okay, I have another book here also along the lines of residential schools, and this book is called Stolen Words. and it's about a little girl who wants her grandfather to teach her some Cree language, but he says that he can't teach her because his words were stolen from him when he went to a residential school. So they set out to help him find his language again. Doesn't that already feel so much better? Look at all these books that I was able to add. So this book is called The Sharing Circle, and this is not a storybook. So this is not one that I would read in front of my students, but basically because it is very text heavy. But it has different stories within this one, and I could read certain selections of stories from this book. So, The Sharing Circle. It says stories about First Nations culture. So I can take little chunks of this book and teach it to my students. All right. I think that's all the books that I have about First Nation, Métis, Inuit culture or Indigenous culture. Now, the next few books I have talk about African culture. So I'm really excited about this book. It's called My Name is Blessing, and this is by the same author, Eric Walters, who wrote a book that we have at our school. So my school, the administration actually purchased every teacher this book, Hope Springs. This was our school book for the year about 3 years ago, and it was a beautiful book. And so when I saw that there was another one by the same author, and I think there's actually a third one too, I wanted to make sure that I had this book. And the reason why I really like this author is because, one, these stories are based in the African country of Kenya. And I know that I have some students from Kenya, but also all of these stories, I should say, are true stories, and they include pictures of the actual events that happened in this story. So my students can look at the pictures and look at life in Kenya, and hopefully some of my students can relate to these stories. So that goes here. This is also a true story. This is called Emmanuel's Dream, and it's written by Laurie Ann Thompson and Sean Qualls. And the reason why I wanted to purchase this story is because it is a true story about a boy who was born without part of his leg, but it was also set in Ghana. So, and it was a true story. So, in West Africa. So I wanted to include it because they actually give you a little note at the end about the true events that have happened. So, Emmanuel's Dream. This next story was eye-opening to me because as Canadians, we have racism and injustice happening in our country. To me personally, I believe that a lot of that racism and injustice is happening to First Nation, Métis, Inuit, Indigenous cultures, but it also is very much happening to people with black skin. And so this book is called Africville. And Africville is about a tiny community in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where it was predominantly made up with African people. And the government repeatedly and continually refused to provide services such as running water or electricity. And it basically drove this community out. And so everyone that lived in this community had to find a new home because they were not given the essentials that they deserve. So right happening in our own country was this racism and injustice. So Africville. Okay, this book is quite exciting. It's called Box Attacks. It's by Kim Smith. There's a few reasons why I wanted to buy this book. One is the main character is a girl, and she is kind of like an architect, and so it's highlighting girls in science, technology, engineering, and math. But this girl is also black-skinned, and I thought that that would be a really awesome resource to amplify that diversity in my classroom. So I'm really excited to add this resource because I think it will be great for girls in my class to see that they can also, have a job in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, and math, but also girls with black skin too. So box attempts. Okay, I have a few more here before we open the box up. I Love My Hair by Natasha Anastasia Tarpley. And I loved this book because I have a lot of girls in my class that come with fancy hair with braided hair and beads in their hair, and they tell me how they spend hours, you know, where mom or auntie does their hair for them. So I'm really excited to include this book in my classroom, and I hope that a lot of my girls can relate to this book. This is feeling a lot better, by the way. I'm starting to see a nice increase in books there. Next book I have is Solway, and it's about a girl that has midnight skin, it's described, and how she does not like her midnight skin and does not feel beautiful in it. And so this book is talks about her journey in finding that she is beautiful. Solway. This book, The Day You Begin by Jacqueline Woodson, is a fantastic book, and it is very relatable to, I hope, a lot of my students. And basically it talks about how there are going to be days when you walk into a room and nobody there is quite like you. There are a lot of reasons to feel different. And this book talks about how in the beginning it's really easy to dwell on the differences and how maybe what you eat is not quite like what everyone else is eating, or maybe the games that you play are not quite what everybody else plays. But the day that you begin to share your own story and realize that those differences make you unique and special is really important. So I'm excited to read this book to my students, The Day You Begin. And the last book that I have here is something a little different, The Proudest Blue. And it was written by the Olympic medalist, Obitaj Mohammed. And it's a story of hijab and family. So it says, with her new backpack and light up shoes, Faiza knows the first day of school is going to be special. It's the start of the brand new school year, and best of all, it's her older sister's Asiya's first day of hijab, made of fabric of beautiful blue like the ocean waving to the sky. And so the reason why I wanted to include this book in my class, even though I don't have any students in my school that wear a hijab, is because it's my job to teach students to respect everyone and to recognize that diversity is important, and to teach others about different cultures, different religions as well. And so I wanted to make sure that I included another representation of different cultures in my classroom. So yeah, The Proudest Blue. And I'm going to put that under Middle Eastern. So unfortunately, out of my new books here that I just showed you guys, I didn't have any Asian books. And I don't think that I purchased any Asian books, but let's open up my new box to see which books I purchased. Oh, scissors. Oh, I'm trying to cut cardboard, so that's why. Okay, here we go. This big box for 2 little books. Oh no, and one of them came ruined. Boo. Okay. Let me just fix that really quickly because I don't like bent pages. Okay, so the 2 books that I've purchased are Let's Talk About Race and Makwa Talks to the Loon. So I purchased this first story because it is a Cree story, and I do have students in my class that are from the Cree tribe, but also it's a Canadian story. So I thought that was a very special little detail, was that it's Canadian. So Makwa Talks to the Loon and Let's Talk About Race. Let's see here. I haven't had a chance to look at it. This is the first time that I'm looking at it. So, oh, interesting. I am a story, so are you. So is everyone. My story begins the same way that yours does. I was born on... Take me, for example. I was born on January 27th, 1939 in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm kind of old, huh? Interesting. That looks good. So this definitely would fall under my category of diversity. So I'm going to add that to my pile. So, as you can see from my collection here, I've managed to amp up my First Nation, Métis, Indigenous, Inuit collection, and I've also managed to amp up my African books that highlight African culture. And I added one more book to my Middle Eastern culture, so I'm really happy with that. This is a culture that I need to make sure that I include more books on. So I need to address and find some books that highlight Filipino culture and Asian culture as well. So I hope you found this video interesting and helpful. If you have a book that you could recommend for me about Filipino culture or any of my categories, if there's a book that you love to teach with, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to check it out. The way that I was able to purchase all of these books is because I started a little fund where I was selling plants, and I was able to get some friends and family to donate some money, and I matched some of those amounts as well, and together I was able to raise $300. So all those books that I have showed you, those all came out to about $300. So I hope you found this helpful. Please give it a like and subscribe, and let me know if you found it very interesting in the comments below. And thanks so much for watching. I'll check you guys out in the next video. Bye!